Hello, good seminarians and any other visitors. Seminarians from Uganda, anywhere else, faculty, staff, lay people, anybody. This is part 2 of my series on homosexuality. I'm going to first talk about the Western challenges, the challenges we face in Western culture in reference to homosexuality. I am then going to talk about the challenges that the African strengths, the strengths that the African culture has that we do not have in the Western culture that we wish we did have. We're going to look at the challenges in Africa. These are ones that I could see. There may be many more. There may be greater ones than the ones I see. But at least this is what an outsider sees when we look at your culture. I'm going to look at real life stories of those men who struggle with same-sex attraction, but are trying to live chaste lives. Among the Western challenges, as I mentioned, is that the Western culture generally denies that homosexuality is against nature. We have respect for nature and respect to climate change and the environment, but not for the nature of the human body. We think it can be anything we want it to be, that we are assigned a gender at birth, and that is not our natural gender. We also deny that homosexuality is against God's will. We claim that Scripture is a human construct and reflects the values of the times rather than God's understanding of the purpose of sexuality. We have an incredible growing acceptance of homosexuality, and even the prevalence of it seems to be growing. In a way, it dominates our culture. Most advertisements, or at least many advertisements, are focused on homosexual relationships. It dominates the news in many ways, to the point where the rights of homosexuals are privileged. And if there's a conflict between, say, the rights of a baker whose religion tells him he should not support homosexuality, and homosexuals who want a wedding cake, the rights, so-called rights of the couple, are privileged over that of the baker. Let's look at the terminology that's used here. We use these initials LGBTQ, and now there's some 60 other letters that go after that, but this will serve. L refers to a lesbian, and that's a female homosexual. G refers to a gay, to a male homosexual, though occasionally G also can be referred to females. B refers to bisexuals, to individuals who have sex with both males and females. T stands for transgender, for someone whose biological sex and subjective gender don't match. We're referring here, of course, to someone who was born a male, but now believes he should have been born a female, and will do almost anything to try to change his gender. Of course, that's not possible. Again, every cell of our body is stamped with the gender we had when we were born. Q refers to any odd sexual identity. Some people say they aren't any sex at all, and there's another 60 apparently configurations. These are some of the Western falsehoods. Modern people tend to believe that homosexuals are born that way. There's no evidence for that. The strongest evidence would be if identical twins were born homosexual, if both twins were homosexual. That's not the case. There are many instances where one twin is homosexual and the other is not. we tend to think it's impossible for those who are LGBTQ to change. As a matter of fact, in the United States, we have laws in many states that forbid psychotherapists or psychologists to help a person who comes in and says, I'm gay and I don't want to be gay. And he is not allowed to try to help that person change. But someone who comes in and says that I'm a male and I want to be a female, the doctor is supposed to immediately help the person make that transition. Many people think the church hates those who are LGBTQ because it says that homosexual acts are immoral. But the church does not hate those who engage in immoral actions. Christ came to save those persons who are all of us. All of us are sinners, and all of us need to be saved. So the church does not hate those who are LGBTQ. In fact, the church wants all such individuals to be in heaven with everyone else. That's why Christ came. So whenever we tell someone they shouldn't be doing what they're doing, they often think that we're mean, judgmental, and hateful. But sometimes we're the most helpful and loving people around. The Western culture seems to think that happiness in this world is not possible without a sexual relationship, and that those who are not having sex could not possibly be happy. The curiosity is that among the most happy people on the face of the earth are actually priests and consecrated women, that they are living lives of service to their Lord. They are living lives filled with love. I want to claim that happiness in this world is not possible without love, without living a life of service. The world has it wrong. We tend to think that happiness is subjective and individual. Again, the church says that to be happy, you need to be loving, and you need to be living lives of service, and you need to be seeking the good, the true, and the beautiful. But the world tells us that no matter what you're doing, if you're a pedophile, that's perfectly fine. If you're addicted to drugs, that's fine, because that's where you find your happiness. We're also a culture that says that people should be allowed to marry those they love. If a male loves another male, he should be allowed to marry that other male. But that's not a principle we use. There are men, unfortunately, fathers, who have a sexual interest in their daughters. We don't say that they should be allowed to marry their daughters. There's school teachers who fall in love with their adolescent students. We don't think teachers should be allowed to marry their adolescent students. Males should be free to marry women who are eligible to marry them, and females to marry males. Other than that, it's not marriage, it's some other relationship, and often it's perverse. The Western culture has also come to be a fairly atheistic culture. We used to be a very believing culture. The United States was filled with believers of one brand or another. I'm told that in Uganda, 100% of people believe in God. But even those who believe in God in the Western culture thinks that we should not be allowed to mention this in public. We're not allowed to say that God would not approve of same-sex marriages. That would be importing our religious beliefs into the public square where they do not belong. But a godless society is a society that is going to go astray, and we have. This is an incredible chart. This chart shows the growth of those who now identify as homosexual. You'll notice in 2012, only about 2% of people identified as homosexual. That's been true for as long as we've been taking studies. But all of a sudden, it's going up in our younger generation to the point where it says in 2022, it's almost 20%. The most recent studies show that it is, This slide shows that the number of those who identify as homosexual has been growing over time. In 2012, it was only 2%, and that's been true for as long as we've been keeping track. In 2022, this slide says it was nearly 20%. Now it's nearly 23% of young people who identify as LGBTQ. It's not possible in my mind that those are all LGBTQ. It just goes to show that it's a popular thing to be. It doesn't mean that these people really don't want to have sex with members of the opposite sex. It's just that they have taken refuge in this curious category. There's been a growing acceptance of same-sex marriages. Back in 1996, fewer than 30% of Americans accepted same-sex marriage. You go another 20 years earlier than that, and virtually nobody did. Right now, it's up to 71% of Americans think that same-sex marriages are acceptable. There is nothing that explains this except the onslaught of the media, of the entertainment world, of politics. This is a very unnatural thing to think that a man can marry a man and a female can marry a female. But we have come to accept it, and young children are taught this in schools, and who knows if it's not going to go up to close to 100% at some time. And this is what we have. Here we have a female minister marrying two males. Here we have two males who have adopted three children. These children are often produced through in vitro fertilization. That should be seen not as a happy picture, but a very, very sad picture. That those men privilege their own desire to be fathers over the well-being of those children. If those children were made for IVF, it's just so sad that they have produced children in a mechanical way, again, to satisfy the desires of two males who are supposedly, quote unquote, married to each other. Those children, even though they have biological mothers, they have no mother in their life. There was a story some time ago in the New York Times about two homosexual fathers in this situation who adopted children. And they asked their daughter what she wanted for Christmas. And she said she wanted a mother. And of course, that's what neither one of them can give. Every possible study on the face of the earth shows that children do better when they have a male as a father and a female as a mother who are married to each other for the rest of their lives. These men supposedly want to do what is best for their children, but they've started off on the wrong foot. We now have pride parades in the United States where homosexuals do obscene and vile things in public, right? They are proud to do these things. You don't see heterosexuals doing these things, so it's coming close. I mean, honestly, the entertainment of the modern world has heterosexuals doing on stage things that should only be done in the privacy of the bedroom. We also have small children going to these parades, and from day one, they are indoctrinated to think that homosexuality is a joyful, wonderful, prideful state. Right? It's in the church now. We have here U.S. Jesuits bolster outreach initiative aimed at encouraging LGBTQ Catholics. There's no attempt to convince these people who come to the church to embrace chastity and to accept the church's teaching on sexuality. Rather, they teach that they were born this way, God made them this way, and God loves them this way. These are two officials in the US government, obviously both transgendered. This is the kind of thing that we Americans have to look at in our news every day. The man in the military suit is the head of the Department of Health. He's not a healthy man, right? The other one, it's unspeakable, the kinds of video he has been in and this sort of thing, entrusted with some of the most important public security operations in the United States. He's been removed, but this is now acceptable in the US government. And of course, we have this huge problem of males competing in women's sports. We have some athletes here, and obviously the person in the middle is a biological male, but he competed as a female, and of course he won. Even the most mediocre of male athletes can generally beat female athletes. This is destroying sports, women's sports in the United States, where men who could not possibly win a competition with other males enter into competition with females and win. They box with them, they wrestle with them, they play basketball with them. They've caused enormous harm to females by simply knocking them over or punching them. Right, what are the African strengths? One is you accept natural law. You know that men belong with women and women belong with men, and the purpose of sex is procreation. That's an obvious truth. It's as obvious, honestly, as the sky is blue and the grass is green. But since we don't want that to be true in the United States, we ignore it. But you know it. Your faith is strong and orthodox. As I said, I've heard that 100% of Ugandans believe in God. You're not ashamed of it. We drove by one day, I stopped at a gas station, and there was a man who was pumping gas who was on a little break, and he was sitting down and he was reading the Bible. And we could see that sometimes in the United States, but not often. And the fact that we run into this on one of our first stops was very revealing to us. Of course, you have the patronage of the martyrs. They stand behind you. And there is, of course, some instance with the martyrs of standing up against the homosexual tyrant, as well as their profession of faith in Jesus. Always, always, always pray to them for help in your struggles. And the church is growing in Uganda. You have many vocations. You're very strong. I'm here to help fortify those vocations. We know some of you go into the priesthood to escape poverty. We understand that. People go into the priesthood for all sorts of reasons, but we know you're believers. And we really hope that in the process of your instruction, you become very true believers in the priesthood and that you want to become priests. Okay, again, the Ugandan martyrs. I was privileged to visit the shrines. I prayed a great deal for the Church of Uganda, for the Church of the United States, for the Church of the world, and hope all those martyrs will help us. Something happened in your country that's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary, and it shows how different Africa is and Uganda is. This bishop, Tumboka, I don't know if that's right, he gave a powerful homily, two powerful homilies, actually, denouncing fiducio supplicans, the church document that approved of blessing same-sex couples, right? We have nothing like that in the United States. A few priests spoke out, but no bishop gave an incredible homily, as did this bishop. And then there was the story of Cardinal Fridolin Mbongo, the president of the Symposium of Episcopal Conferences of Africa and Madagascar. He went to Rome. He got on a plane and went to Rome, got there and he called up the Holy Father, I believe it was a Tuesday, and said, I'm here. We in Africa cannot bless same-sex couples. We do not believe that is God's will, right? And the Holy Father said, all right, go talk to Bishop Tuco, head of the Cardinal Tuco at the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. And they worked out a compromise for Africa. It should be a compromise. There shouldn't be any compromise. They should withdraw the document. But, said, well, Africa has, they think homosexuality is ugly in Africa. No, no, no. You think it's wrong. You know it's wrong. It is wrong, right? But he also said this. Ambango also stressed that although Africa opposes the blessing of same-sex couples, it is necessary to respect homosexual people because they are human beings. We should not look at them, treat them with contempt. They are creatures of God, and as creatures of God, if an individual homosexual asks for a blessing, we bless the person. We can bless him as a person. In the United States, we have, I think the highest number we got to, maybe a few more chimed in, but 3 bishops put out negative statements towards fiducio supplicans. And within 24 hours, I think less, of fiducio supplicans being issued, Father James Martin, a Jesuit priest, called up 2 men he knew to be in a homosexual so-called marriage and gave them a blessing. And just somehow, a photographer from the New York Times happened to be there and took a picture. And it appeared on the cover of the New York Times, supposedly the most respected newspaper in the United States. And it ignited everything. People thought that soon homosexual couples would be able to be married. Now, of course, Fiducio Supplicans denies that, but there was no disciplining of Father Martin. These are meant to be done privately, not in public, right? Not to appear as though there was some sort of wedding. Now, Uganda has done some remarkable things, so I have great hope that Uganda can lead us out of this madness. Back in the early 1990s, when HIV was going wild, Uganda put together a program that's proved to be the best program that was ever developed for slowing the spread of HIV. A scholar from Harvard University, Edward Green, promoted this study that says, affirming love, avoiding AIDS, what Africa can teach the West. Can you add a program called ABC? Abstinence, don't have sex before marriage. B, be faithful to your spouse. And C, if you have to, use a condom. So the first HIV case in Uganda was in 1982. And a commission was established to address it in 1986. And they developed the approach in 1992. And you can see in that chart how the number of cases decreased from 1990-92 to 2000. There's no other country in the world that had this success. And the reason the world doesn't know about it is that we think Africans are out of control sexually. They couldn't have done that because we think, and we know in a sense, we couldn't do it. We're more sexually out of control, obviously, right? Much more so, right? And also the pharmaceutical companies didn't want it to succeed. They couldn't be selling their vaccines. They couldn't be selling their antiviral drugs, right? But Uganda did it. So if Uganda could do that for the HIV, I'm hoping Uganda can do it to stop the spread of homosexuality throughout the world. Uganda has experienced the sharpest decrease in HIV/AIDS-related death rate in the world between 1990 and 2017, with an 88% decrease over a time span of 27 years. You also have an enormous number of seminarians. What a strength. The threshold for clergy renewal is estimated at 12.5 seminarians per priest. Europe is below that. They have 9 seminarians per 100 priests, as is North America, which has 11.21 per 100. While Africa shows a spectacular ratio, 65 per 1,000, which suggests that we'll continue to grow in the ecclesial demography of the decades to come. We have had many Ugandan priests come to the United States. Most of them have been spectacular. A few, unfortunately, have run off with a woman. Not a good thing. But we want your priest here. You are outstanding priests. We don't want to take your outstanding priests. You need outstanding priests too. But maybe you have a few extra that you can send our way. You're true believers. Maybe even those who run off with women are really true believers, but they give in to their appetites. We have a lot who are not true believers in the sense that they've been taught false things in seminary. And so they can't teach the truth because they were never taught it. The challenges in Africa, one is the prevalence of sexual abuse. Another is that you need to fight the NGOs, the non-government organizations. These are organizations that are trying to impose Western values on Uganda. And as I've said, a Western value is the acceptance and even the privileging of homosexuality. Africa needs to come to understand the causes and nature of homosexuality. I don't think you do have much of an understanding. And the priests I've talked to tell me people don't talk about sex, and they certainly don't talk about homosexuality. We talk about both rather incessantly in the United States, way too much. But one reason we do is because it's in our face all the time. So for the last really 50 years or so, psychologists, therapists have been thinking a lot about homosexuality, doing a lot of studies, and we've discovered a lot, which I hope to share with you. It's going to be a challenge in Africa to provide good pastoral care for men and women who have same-sex attraction. You're not used to dealing with this demographic. They actually need an enormous amount of love and pastoral care, and I'll explain why. You also, of course, as I've been saying all along, you need to resist Western influence. If people are trying to sell you some value because it's what we value in the United States, be very, very wary of that. All right, let me talk a little bit about the prevalence of sex abuse in Uganda. According to Reese Mann, the founder of South African Male Survivors of Sexual Abuse, 1 in 6 adult males in the country, this is South Africa, have been victims of sexual offenses in their lifetimes. And in 2012, 19.4% of all sexual abuse victims were male. But men are up to 10 times less likely than women to report sexual violence against them. I'm sorry, it says in Uganda, it should say in South Africa. I don't know how like Uganda is to South Africa, but let me assume for the minute it's close enough. That's a lot, 1 in 6 adult males. And it's a problem for many reasons, but one is sexual abuse of males is one of the major contributing factors to developing same-sex attraction, to becoming a homosexual, right? It's something that needs to be very strenuously fought against. Boys need to be fortified not to let other males touch them in a sexual way. Violence against women. I'm talking mostly about male homosexuality in this talk because it's much easier to understand than female homosexuality. Females are much more fluid, you might say, in their sexual attractions, but I really need to talk about violence against women. I found this report. In Uganda, 1 in 5 women aged 15 to 49 have experienced sexual violence. Fear of harassment and abuse are part of many women's daily realities, but they are often disregarded. Nobody takes sexual harassment seriously around here. It's difficult to say you were sexually harassed, said a shopkeeper in Gabaganda, on the outskirts of Kampala. Where would one go? To the police? She adds, laughing. Victims reporting their experiences are often met with skepticism and disbelief by the authorities. Many cases go unreported, as those who do speak out are often blamed for the abuse. I know it's hard for cultures who are not accustomed to talking about sex to deal with these things. And I appreciate the inclination to want to keep sexual matters private. That's absolutely appropriate. But when violence has been done and when abuse has been done, the desire to speak modestly about sexuality should not be permitted to get in the way. The church particularly can be helpful in this regard. The church is not uncomfortable talking about sex. We know that we need to talk about it in order to understand how to behave morally in respect to sexual matters. I know modesty can be violated, and I know that it's right to keep private things private, but the church has the right understanding of these things and needs to be a place where people can come to who will understand that when I deal with sexual abuse victims, and I've dealt with quite a few, it's so important that they be believed. That's an enormous part of their healing, is that people believe what they say. There's this remarkable book, Child Abuse and Neglect in Uganda. Studies have been done. Priests should be paying attention to this. Maybe not every priest, but every priest should be attending sessions like this one, where they can learn something about what they need to know in order to help their flock. This is from the report of Anti-Sexuality Act of 2023 that talks about homosexuality moving into the schools. It said the committee is also aware that the media has recently been awash with reports of sodomy and lesbianism in Ugandan schools, and have reported that grooming and recruitment of school children into homosexuality has taken in shape in Uganda. Incidents of teachers engaging their students in homosexuality are being reported with increasing regularity. Schools have reported expelling homosexual students, while teaching materials recognizing and normalizing same-sex relationships have found their way into schools. Of course, this is true in the United States, but it needs to be stopped. I hope these teachers are fired. I hope these teachers are reported to the legal authorities. You have very strong laws in Uganda, and if they are enforced, it may put an end to some of these things. People don't want to spend the rest of their lives in jail. They do not want to be executed for engaging in homosexual predation. Something needs to be done. I don't know if it's good to have such strict laws. I don't want to comment so much on the laws of other nations, but I do want to say that really serious measures need to be taken against the teachers. It talks about expelling homosexual students, as it said, with the irony that at the same time they teach that same-sex relations are normal and fine. If a young person has same-sex attraction, really, if anybody has same-sex attraction, that almost always means that they've been abused or they've been introduced to homosexual pornography or something has happened to them. I don't know that they should be expelled. Maybe they should, but they most likely need a lot of therapy. I know there's not a lot of therapists in Uganda. We have too few in the United States, but priests can do a lot. Understanding adults can do a lot. The church needs to be a place where students have been, say, seduced or groomed or recruited by teachers or NGO workers, where they can come and talk about it and get some healing. All right, the next part is going to be on saying real life stories, but I believe this section maybe has gone on long enough. So I will do a part 2 of part 2. Thank you.